Money, 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 money. They have a lot of it. They are terrible on abortion, voting rights, LGBTQ issues. The Democratic Party is not as racist, anti-woman, furious, hate-filled, angry.
We are pleased to be joined by Rena Steinzor, professor of law at Maryland Carey School of Law and author of American Apocalypse, the 6 far-right groups waging war on democracy. I want to start by saying thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us.
My pleasure.
Yes, and the pleasure is ours. So I do love in the book how you relate the relation of the 6 groups, the 6 horsemen, that kind of portrayal and deal. Could you briefly kind of give us the rundown of what these 6 groups are and kind of what the title of them represents? Because I'm sure you could do it more justice than I could.
Well, the 6 groups are big business, I mean really big. The Tea Party, which is embodied in the House as the Freedom Caucus, which is about to crash the budget. The Federalist Society, which is a group of right-wing, far-right lawyers who brought us the Supreme Court we have now. Fox News, of course, everybody knows about them. White evangelicals, and I stress white, and militia groups, like the ones who rioted at the Capitol on January 6th.
So how did you, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
So how did you come to find, or I guess define these 6 groups, not just as they exist, but specifically as the 6 horsemen of the American apocalypse?
Well, you could come up with all sorts of different lists. What happened was that for most of my career, I've specialized in health, safety, and environmental rules and other efforts to combat climate change, to make sure medicine, food, and the air don't hurt us. And all of a sudden, I started thinking about how my enemy from that perspective was corporations who resisted any of these protections that most people want. And then I started thinking about it, and I thought, there's more than just them. And especially was brought home by 2 things. One was what happened with the Supreme Court, which is, from my perspective as a lawyer, shocking.
Yeah, totally.
And then the second thing was that as January 6th came and went, I worked on the Hill and I was stunned. I mean, I walked those halls. I would have been sitting under the table hoping the lock on the door worked. That was just very scary, that whole thing. And each one of these groups had an or in when that happened. So, for example, big corporations said, we don't approve of this, and we're not going to contribute to Republicans who fought certifying Joe Biden as the winner. And the next thing you knew, 2 months later, they were back to giving money to those people. So, as just one example.
Awesome. And that's actually something I was going to ask you about, but I did want to ask, with these groups coexisting to make up the right as we know it, can you speak to what the systemic means behind them are that allows them to have this power that they wield rather successfully, as at least of recent?
Money. Money, money, money. They have a lot of it. And as just one example, Leonard Leo, who is the person who brought you 5 of the 6 justices who make up the conservative supermajority, a man who makes surge suppressors, that you have for your computer, gave him his company, Trip Light. And then that guy, the company, Leonard Leo, sold it for $1.6 billion and now is using that to make sure that more conservative judges are in place. And they are terrible on abortion, voting rights, LGBTQ issues, and mostly they go right against what most people think.
And when we're speaking of them coexisting, kind of how you gave an example of on January 6th, could you kind of go into like some of these roles that the different groups played on that day, and not just what they did on that day, but also like the danger this could mean in terms of something like that happening again?
Yes, and I think we are in serious danger of that. Each chapter has at the end of it a little conclusion that is, well, not so little, entitled Insurrection. And for example, the Federalist Society, two of the lawyers that were most actively pushing former President Trump's crazy theories about why he won, are members of the Federalist Society, and were very prominent in its leadership. And as another example, Fox News has been sued by the people who made the voting machines. They were accused of rigging the vote, and that's just not remotely possible. So
Yeah, I lost the, I believe, largest defamation lawsuit in American history from
yes.
parroting those Trump lies. I'm sure they learned their lesson. At least you would hope, but doesn't really seem like it.
Well, it's actually very interesting because they settled with the first company for $787 million. And they're about to have trial with the second in New York. So, well, they slandered those people terribly. And Fox News was right up there, despite the companies sending them hundreds of emails trying to get meetings, explaining that their machines were not rigged. Fox News kept airing it. So
Yep, whatever fits their narrative, and they ignore everything else, despite how
that's
true it is.
exactly
And
right.
one of the groups you mentioned, and I know it comes down to one of these six groups you talk about, is like the Federalist Society, and I think that the Heritage Foundation can kind of fit right in there with them. Could you kind of lay out the role that these two groups have played in sort of forming this conservative faction we know today? I know you spoke about helping pack the courts, but just any other means maybe they utilize as well.
Well, I actually, and it doesn't matter because, the categories are, like all categories, porous at the edges. But I actually think the Heritage Foundation, which has been accused of inventing Project 2025, was created by multi-billionaires back in the beginning of all of this in the early 1970s. And they have a whole building, and they have a budget that is huge. And they keep getting contributions because they do this work. They're doing political work through a group called Heritage Action. So
And I feel like the answer to this next question also will largely boil down to money, but could you kind of explain what the discrepancy is from Democrats and Republicans, where we don't really see prominent groups like the Federalist Society or the Heritage Foundation on the left, at least with nearly as much influence or power as these two groups have had on the right?
well, I basically agree with that, although Democrats take money just from different sources. So, for example, Hollywood and Wall Street are big Democratic contributors. In general, though, the Democratic Party is not as racist, anti-woman, anti-people who love different people. And so they are, in general, better. I mean, the first woman of color is running for president. And this is a big breakthrough, as was the Obama presidency. So I think it is money, not to try and whitewash the Democratic Party. And in some cases, so for example, militia groups are very committed, mostly white, vast majority, committed to guns and resisting any effort to control the use of guns. And they just went nuts on January 6th. They had actually brought a whole catch of guns and put them in a motel where they were staying in Virginia because the guns would be illegal in Washington, D.C. And they hoped that Trump would call them forward and ask them to defend his presidency, his claim he won the election.
I wanted to ask you about the militias as well that exist on the right, like the Proud Boys, for instance, is the one that would come to mind for me first. And they seem to want to tilt the discourse largely towards like the culture war centered issues rather than policy. And that could you kind of explain what their role is in this fight against democracy?
Well, sure, I would love to do that. Here's an example of what they have been doing. There is a movement in the Southwest and Western states, not California, but Montana, Utah, those states out there, to harass public health officials who were trying to compel people to wear masks. They supported keeping the schools closed. Whatever you may think about those measures, the public health officials were just doing the best they can because we didn't know about a lot of the science of the pandemic until it had been going on for a while. And what the militia members did was they would go to people's houses, the public health officials' house, and demonstrate on the front lawn to the point that hundreds of such officials quit. They weren't making big money. And one woman had been driven to the point where she told her children not to do their homework in front of the window because she was afraid the militia would come and shoot at them. This is really bad news because we cannot, even in states that are more blue, you can't control a pandemic if some people are refusing to comply with what the government is telling people to do. So if there's another one, and the experts tell us there definitely will be in large measure because of climate change, because animals are moving and animals were what started this pandemic, we'll be in big trouble.
What do you to what effect do you think that Trump has empowered these groups from rhetoric wise, seeming that he's not willing to strike down against them, whether it be the stand back and stand by, or there's people on both sides? What part do you think he's had in kind of like normalizing, so to speak, or pushing up, projecting up these groups?
He's done an amazingly effective job. If you looked at him during the debate, the one that we just had that 67 million people watched, he gets his face gets red, and he starts talking about how the nation is a mess, it's a wreck, it's on the edge of nuclear war. And this is the kind of furious, hate-filled, angry approach to what's going on in this country that makes people just feel like it's hard to get out of bed in the morning. Now, your stand back but stand by was addressed, of course, to the Proud Boys. And he was telling them that he might need them if the election was stolen. And he still says it was stolen. So.
Yeah, it's a lie that he is unwilling to give up. He even said it in the debate, like, no, I didn't lose the last election. So he doesn't it doesn't matter how much it hurts him. It seems like he's going to stick to his guns on that one.
Yeah, and he's completely uncontrolled. I was just watching some of the late night jokes about the debate. And one of the things that he did was, Taylor Swift endorsed Harris Waltz. And Trump said, out over Truth Social, I hate Taylor Swift. I mean, she's a rock star with how many followers?
Yeah, millions, hundreds of millions, a lot. Yeah. So We kind of spoke about a big one, but I'm wanting to know if you could explain the effect that Fox News has had on our political sphere. Obviously, like the example we pointed out of how they push these election lies is a big one, but just in terms of the overall shifting of the narrative, moving more people right, and normalizing propaganda as well, could you kind of go into the role they've played in this as well also?
Yes, and I'm especially happy to do it because I have a little bit of good news, if you can believe it.
Oh no.
Okay, yeah. It's I'm an apocalypse person, but I am hopeful
There we
when
go.
I look at people like you, who
Thank
are a lot younger than I am.
you.
Um, the Fox News audience is old, generally 65 and older, mostly men, disproportionate number of men, and white, of course. And they sit there and watch Fox News for hours and hours and sort of take up everything that is being said there. I have students who are your age, and when I say to them, where do you get your news? Cable television? They sort of look at me as if I have grown a third head.
What's cable?
Cable?
Yeah.
So actually, I think these people are on their way out the door. And what I think about the new election is it's possible, because we all know the demographics of the country are changing. It's possible that the demographics have already changed enough that Harris will win. And we can only hope that's true, because that's why they're all so angry. They're into white replacement theory, which accuses the Democrats of importing people of color from other countries who will be docile and not vote for Republicans. I mean, these conspiracy theories are truly far out. And it's also true, as one of my students pointed out last semester, that we have jobs that are not filled in this country. And we block immigrants from coming here, even though we are a country of immigrants. And the reason, why would we do that when there are jobs that folks might take?
I would say I was surprised by the level of conspiracy theories they believe, but I can't say that I am. I mean, when you're voting for the party that talks about Jewish space lasers and all these crazy things, it's like anything can be possible at that point.
Absolutely. And that the Democrats are conspiring. I mean, the Democrats, pretty amazing that they got their act together to change candidates, but they're the group that everybody says they organize a firing squad by standing in a circle. So what can we
Yeah,
do?
and yet they're planning 10 years, 3 steps ahead in the future by doing this. So the last question I want to ask you is, as we kind of talk about the different 6 groups that you mentioned in your book, could you kind of go into how the anti-democratic nature, or as is in the title of the book, Waging the War on Democracy, how this is kind of the thread that connects all the 6 groups into the right as we know it today?
Yes. They believe that the government is bad and that everybody in the government is either a dope or a criminal conspirator who's trying to undercut Donald Trump and MAGA, MAGA being bigger than Donald Trump.
Mhm.
They believe that climate change is a hoax. They firmly believe that women should be forced to carry a baby to term, no matter what the circumstances are. And they have plans to basically, they say, this is Project 2025, fire anywhere from 20,000 to 50,000 civil servants, get rid of them and replace them with their own people. Now, you may remember the Trump presidency, they were never organized enough to carry out something on that scale.
Yeah.
But that's what they say they're going to do. And they actually have 20,000 resumes in some database banks somewhere. And if you went to challenge that in court, because civil servants have protection for reasons, there are laws, it would take so long, and then it would end up in the Supreme Court. So the government would be disrupted. It would be hard to get anything done. people who depend on them for Medicare, Medicaid, for Head Start, for a whole series of important programs, for the military, for taking care of vets in the VA, for keeping the banking system stable. All of this could be disrupted, and it would just be pretty frightening to see.
To
'Cause
say
we
the
don't,
least.
yeah, we don't realize how important it is. Sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, that's to say the least. It would be frightening.
Right.
So I do want to say thank you again for
Thank
taking
you
the
for
time to speak
having
with
me. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate you. It was a wonderful conversation. And again, if anybody wants to see the book to check out more about the 6 groups that are waging war on our democracy, I will have a link to it in the description. And it is American Apocalypse, the 6 far right wing groups waging war on democracy. Again, I just appreciate you very much taking the time, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. You too.